Вітаємо! Це подкаст «Коли все має значення». Мене звати Ангеліна Карякіна, а зі мною тут разом співведуча
Наталка Гуменюк. Усім привіт!
Привіт, Наталко. У нас розмова так виходить, до особливої дати, трагічної, до дати удару, російського ракетного удару по Краматорську, в якому, зокрема, загинула наша колега, знайома Віка Амеліна. І, звісно, що ця розмова – це і про пам'ять про неї, але не лише, тому що це розмова з дуже цікавою людиною, дуже талановитою людиною, відомою, колумбійським письменником Héctorом Абадом Faciolince. Наталко, розкажи, будь ласка, про що саме ви з ним говорили?
Я давно чекала на неї, дуже хвилювалася, тому що Héctor Abad тоді колумбійський письменник, який, чесно кажучи, до України якогось особливого стосунку не мав, хоча не зовсім так. Він був тим, хто підтримував кампанію Aguanta Ucrania, друзів України. В Колумбії, чесно кажучи, випадково він приїхав до України, так і випадково потрапив тоді до Kramatorska, скажімо так, не змігши відмовити своїм друзям. І опинився в епіцентрі цього удару, і, по суті, є вцілілим, є так само жертвою цієї атаки. На цьому місці було 3 колумбійців. Каталіна Gómez, журналістка, наша колега, яку ми добре знаємо, яка довго працює в Україні, український її продюсер Дмитро Ковальчук, і також колумбійський політик, який займався перемовним процесом, Серхіо Jaramillo. І до них долучилася в останню хвилину Віка Амеліна, і, власне, Вікторія тоді загинула. Héctor зміг нарешті дописати книгу, яка, по суті, є книгою присвятою Вікторії. Вона називається «Тепер і час». Це частинка «Радуйся, Марія». Héctor в першому питанні, власне, пояснить, чому така особлива назва. Ця книга щойно вийшла. Вона англійською називається «Now and at the Hour». Вона поки є іспанською. Я не мала змоги її читати, але Каталіна читала і, власне, сказала, що це неймовірно красива книга, присвячена багато в чому Вікторії і присвячена людям в Краматорську, присвячена іншим людям, які загинули в цю трагедію в Ria Pizza. Він згадує це книга про Україну. І вона буквально зараз вийшла друком, є кілька інтерв'ю Héctora іспанською, і є так само описи і рев'ю на цю статтю в найбільшому іспаномовному виданні «El País», які, по суті, знову дали голос цим подіям. Да, вони просто приголомшливо хороші. Я коли читала, там, не знаю, хто писав ці рев'ю, вони дуже чуйні, говорять, що ця книга про вину, про горювання, про біль, але так само вона якось намагається дати сенс тому, що сенсу немає. Скажімо так, загибелі людей не мають сенсу. Я бачилася з Héctorом півроку тому, взимку, коли я була в Колумбії, в його рідному місті Медеїн, де він живе і працює. Я мала там виступи, до яких він приєднався в університетах. І, чесно кажучи, тоді я Héctora побачила, вам кажу чесно, це була така дуже швидкий момент. Ми були на книжковому арсеналі всі разом. Віка модерувала останню дискусію, я була кураторкою, фокус-теми, яка називалася «Коли все має значення», яка дала назву цьому подкасту. А перед тим вона була на дискусії, де було представлення книги Héctora, іншої книги Héctora, української «Ми забуття, яке настане», про його батька, про вбивство його батька, дуже відомого колумбійського гуманіста-лікаря. І я тільки встигла тоді з Héctora побачити, а я знала, теж познайомилася з Серхіо, ми якось комунікували, і він навіть запитував про цю поїздку в Краматорськ, чи безпечно їхати. І Héctor встиг мені подарувати книгу. Власне, я його побачила. Після цього я його не бачила. І, власне, коли їхала до Медельїна, Héctor запропонував зупинитися в нього. І я тобі зараз скажу, що мені і тоді було дуже складно питати про Краматорськ. Я знала, що йому дуже тяжко дається ця книга. Дуже тяжко, дуже болісно. І тому я з ним тоді про Краматорськ не говорила. Ми говорили про Медельїн, ми говорили про війну, він ходив на наші заходи. В нього тільки тоді народилися онуки, тільки народилися 2 онуків-близнюків. Він якось вважає, що це дуже також в чомусь символічно, бо в Краматорську загинули дівчата-близнюки, він ці речі пов'язує. І я, правда, тоді навіть зрозуміла, що я запишу цю розмову з ним, але пізніше. Бо просто не могла. Я думаю, що ось це той приклад такого провини вцілілого. Ми ж, як The Reckoning Project, працюємо з людьми, які вижили. Ми не опитуємо людей, які вмерли. Ми не можемо цього робити. І ми з великою чуйністю до них ставимося, бо люди пережили трагедію. Це і є ознака вцілілого і жертви. Для нас жертви – це живі люди. По великому рахунку ми працюємо з жертвами, але з людьми, які живі. А в цьому випадку є страшна ситуація, в якій є наша подруга і близька людина, яка загинула. І якось ті, хто вижили, що Каталіна, що Ектор, що Серхіо, вони якось не називають себе жертвами, вони не позиціонують. І я розумію, що ми живемо, вони живуть з цим страшним порівнянням. І я лише пам'ятаю, що я дуже пізно після якогось перельоту прилетіла і приїхала вночі додому, до його дружини, вона видавчиня. І він знав мене, він знав через Каталіну, і ми познайомимося вночі в нього вдома. І я розумію, що тільки на запитанні про Україну, тільки на питання її дружини, чим я займаюся, я говорю, що я журналістка, і я людина, яка, документує воєнні злочини, я приїхала з України, і я тільки намагаюся якось обережно розумію сказати, що я не хочу ходу казати, що я знала Віку, і починати з цього наше, скажімо, знайомство. Я розумію, що вона дружина стискає його руку, і їм тільки нагадування людини з України, яка до них приїжджає, для них це вже складна історія, розумієш?
Настільки болюча для всієї родини.
Абсолютно. І знаєш, він дуже тонка і чуттєва людина, і тому ось нарешті, коли книга вийшла, коли є ця річниця, звісно, для мене було очевидно, з ким хотілося б обговорити. Я не говорила дуже багато, і, в принципі, не говорила про те, що сталося тоді в Краматорську. Я думаю, це не про це розмова. Тому я радше питала і про книгу, і про спогади, і як працювати з цією пам'яттю, і про Україну, і як сприймалося все це Колумбії, як, тобто все, що, скажімо, що дотичне, але не, умовно кажучи, опис, а що сталося 27 червня 2023 року в Краматорську. Тобто це не було предметом моєї розмови. Я думаю, Ектор виклав це в книзі, я сподіваюся, вона мусить, мені здається, вийти українською, окрім англійської. Я впевнена, що він розкаже достатньо. Він має текст дуже потужний, який вийшов одразу після атаки, який тоді вийшов в світових виданнях. Я ще тоді його читала, він був це був дуже сильний текст, його можна знайти, перекласти Google Translate, тому я ці речі не запитувала. Ми говорили загалом, звісно, про Віку. Звісно, ми говорили про Віку багато. Я навіть тут не буду повторюватися, але я наголошую в нашій вступі до цієї розмови про те, що таке враження, що дійсно Ектор живе з цим обов'язком залишатися голосом Віки в світі, голосом письменника, який продовжує розповідати за письменницю, яка загинула.
Ти після цієї розмови ділилася своїми враженнями коротко, і ти сказала, що тебе вразила його фраза про наші смерті, що він нібито думав, що не може бути такого поняття, а тут тепер зрозумів. Можеш трошечки пояснити, що саме він мав на увазі? Це не те, що спойлер, але звернути увагу на щось особливе в цій розмові.
Чесно кажучи, з цього починається розмова. Я його запитала, чи його книга називається таким чином. Тому що я теж людина релігійна, я не знаю на пам'ять «Радуйся, Марія», чесно кажучи. Це дуже відома молитва, одна з ключових молитв. І він так само сказав, що він хоч не є людиною релігійною, його все життя, не все життя, постійно йому було дивно, чому буквальний переклад, я знайшла тепер і в час нашої смерті. Він говорив, я ніколи не розумів, що таке час нашої смерті. Ми говоримо про мою смерть, про чиюсь смерть, але вона не наша. Як може бути смерть нашою? І, власне, тоді, в той момент в Краматорську, він для себе це зрозумів. І говорив він і про події в Краматорську, і про події загалом в Україні, про цю війну, що таке є нашою смертю. Він доволі детально про це говорить. Але, власне, з цього і починається наша розмова, Ліно, і я тому думаю, що вона, от навіть цей момент вказує на глибину сприйняття ним всього, умовно кажучи. Я хіба додам ще дві речі, які напряму не стосуються і не подій в Краматорську, яким ми присвячуємо цю розмову всім, хто загинув, всім, хто переживає цю втрату. Я хочу, знову ж таки, я усіляко раджу читати іншу книгу Héctora Abada «Ми забуття, яке настане». Ця книга вийшла в українському перекладі, та єдина книга, яка доступна його українською мовою. Власне, це було приводом його приїхати в Україну. Вона дуже хороша. Це його батько просто був визначною людиною для Колумбії. Він був людиною, яка започаткувала вакцинацію, агітувала за допомогу бідним, надання базової медичної допомоги людям в Колумбії в 70-80-ті. Фактично він створив те, що ми називаємо громадським здоров'ям, систему охорони здоров'я для людей, і, зокрема, в рідному місті Медельіні. Але його родина Héctora походить з дуже відомої, впливової родини, заможної, зокрема, в якій були там впливові священники, політики і решта, а в Колумбії традиційно вони 70-ті, 80-ті роки це були консервативні, швидше праві, такі заможні люди. Тому родина від батька, скажімо так, відрікалася, так, засуджувала його, називаючи ліваком, але для повстанців, для тих партизан, які були в Медельіні, для цих людей батько був, скажімо так, занадто мейнстрімовим, да? Він не підтримував радикальні дії, і зрештою він загинув під час, це був замах на вбивство, він загинув, так? І тут питання, що Héctor був дуже молодим, і для них, і для родини є дуже символічним, що Héctorу в 23-му році було рівно стільки років, скільки його батько, коли він загинув. І ще це є під час розмови, але я так можу наголосити, щоб це було більш розбірливо. Héctor, власне, нагадував, він казав, що мій батько – то герой, але як дитина нам не треба таке геройство. Я не хочу мати батька-героя, хочу мати живого батька, і це теж якась важлива історія для нього, чому важливо вижити, да? Чому важливо не бути просто цим відомим людиною-героєм. Він прожив все життя з розумінням, що таке мати батька-героя, якого загинули, але не мати батька. Це ще одна важлива його історія. І третя річ, все-таки Медельін відомий місто, це місто оплот Пабло Ескобара. Місто, де була в свій час одне з найнебезпечніших місць у світі. Де був картель, але складна історія. Ескобар проводив в своєму місці певні соціальні програми, щось там будував стадіони, підтримував якихось бідних. І там була складна історія теж цього політичного розподілу. Але що важливо, в нас є інший подкаст з відомим журналістом Джон Лі Андерсоном, який написав прекрасний текст дуже давно про Ескобара і про Медельін, про те, як це місто, умовно кажучи, з одного боку воно зберігає пам'ять про потерпілих, про вбитих, про закатованих від рук всіх, але в тому числі від картелів. Але в цей час залишається оцей поп-туризм, який Джон Лі назвав огидним. Коли приїжджають туристи шляхами Ескобара, ніби це смішно. Ми знаємо, що син Ескобара відрікся від свого батька. Умовно кажучи, зберігається оця нечутлива пам'ять, яка дуже болюча для містян, які знають, що їхній там людина в їхньому місті, найвідоміша людина з їхнього міста є злочинцем, яка скоїла дуже багато поганих речей. Але сьогодні, через багато років, є ось таке вичищення пам'яті і захоплення ним. Ми меншою мірою, ми, в принципі, мало про це говорили з Héctorом, да, бо це була про інша розмова. І я, власне, питала про те, як Медельін – це дуже красиве місто. Це дуже красиве, дуже симпатичне, дуже розвинене місто з неймовірними університетами, з неймовірною інфраструктурою сьогодні. Умовно кажучи, ти як українець зараз приїжджаєш, розумієш, це спокійне, красиве місце в горах, де там все дуже класно, воно теж дуже непросте, але там дуже круті університети, все дуже модне, сучасне і все таке інше. Але я хочу на цьому наголосити, щоб люди теж розуміли, звідки Héctor, та, і що це за його історія. Вони з дружиною мають видавництво, яке друкує і підтримує колумбійських письменників. Воно робить якісь неймовірно красиві книжки, дуже красиві, да, дуже якісь симпатичні, дуже особливі. І за це теж їхню родину дуже-дуже люблять і цінують. Тобто це дуже, скажімо так, особлива людина, так, для цього світу, ким він є, і тому для мене це тяжка була дуже розмова. Не знаю чому, ми ж записуємо ці подкасти мало не щотижня, да, але тут емоційно якось стриматися було складно навіть через от нього, да, і треба розуміти, ось так сталося в його житті, що він вижив, він залишається вцілілим і жертвою цього страшного удару. Віка не вижила. Зараз є також книжка, яка вийшла англійською мовою «Looking at Women, Looking at War», да, яку писала Victoria яку варто читати, поки вона є англійською мовою, так хотіла Віка. І зараз вона є винятково англійською, але напевно, це от те, що ми могли зробити в ці дні, щоб цю подію, згадати цю страшну подію.
Щоб пам'ять про Віку і про її роботу, не просто про неї як про людину, а про людину, яка дуже сильно дбала про свою роботу і переймалася, що для кого, як вона робить, щоб лишалася пам'ять, активна, жива пам'ять і про неї, і про її роботу. Ну що ж, давайте слухати розмову Талки з колумбійським письменником Héctorом Abadом Faciolince.
Ми дуже дякуємо нашим слухачам, вам за ту підтримку, яку ви здійснюєте для цього подкасту, зокрема для роботи наших чудових колег, звукорежисерки Люби Гук і редакторки Іри Лопатіної. І на прохання ваше ми це зробили. Ми створили на сторінці лабораторії журналістики суспільного інтересу не просто сторіночку, де ви можете донатити за реквізитами, але й можливість робити одноразовий донат і регулярний донат. Довелося нам попрацювати над цим, але тепер це можливо. Знаю, що ці донати приходять. Це дуже-дуже нас підтримує. Знаємо, що в Україні багатьох потрібно підтримувати, але якщо є така змога, щоб ці розмови далі виходили, ми вам неймовірно вдячні. Це дуже надихає. I really appreciate you talking. I know it's not an easy talk in any case, but you've done something really, difficult as well, because I kind of know that it was not easy for you to write this book. Now and at the hour. Yes, it's in Spanish would be called Ahora, hora. And this book is about your experience in Ukraine. This book is about Victoria. This book about the events of the past 2 years. And I probably will make this introduction because for the last 3 years we are talking, our team, as you know, is working on the war crimes documentation. So we're talking to a lot of people who were at the sites of the tragedies, who are survivors, who are victims. And we know that everybody always has, a lot of feeling of guilt, a lot of other things, it's there. So I truly appreciate everybody who talks disregarding who you are, a writer, a soldier, a person, an official. It's for the human being. We're never prepared for that. Wherever you say, nobody is prepared. So I truly appreciate it. But to start probably with that, it might be a strange question to the writer. I don't know how writers treat this type of question. This name of the book, Now at the Hour, it's apart from Ave Maria, what I understand.
Yes, it is.
Why? Why and what it means? What are you saying with this?
Well, I arrived to Ukraine exactly 2 years ago, on the 23rd of June, and I went only to the book fair, to the Arsenal book fair, because there were 2 very young ladies who opened a publishing house. And they are very young. I didn't want to go to Ukraine because I was afraid, but I went there. And for me, it was always very strange that the hour in this Holy Mary, in this Ave Maria, is the hour of our death. And I realized in Ukraine, and I thought for many years that the death, our death, is not our death, it's my death. That is something that happened to you. That is only something to happen to I, the person. My mother dies, my father dies, one person dies. But during the war, it's true that it's our death. It's a plural. It's very strange. Many people are dying at the same time. And when, after the Arsenal, I was convinced to go to the Donetsk region and to Kramatorsk. And when we moved around the real war without this destruction of churches, hospitals, schools, normal houses. And at the end, the Ria Pizza, this restaurant, I understood perfectly that it was the hour of not only of my death, but the hour of many people, of our death, of 13 people at the same time, and 72 more than were not killed exactly, but they were wounded, and they were probably, I don't know, they have very grave, very serious things in their bodies. Maybe you don't have a hand or an eye or something. But in some ways, I felt that it was the hour of, for days you think that maybe also you died with all that people. For weeks, for months, even while I was writing the book, I had this doubt about if I was still alive or not. So I felt that it was not the death of Victoria, of the young twins who died in the same restaurant with their father who survived. And that was an obsession for me. It was the death of many people at the same time, and of many Ukrainians are dying every day. So it's not the death of one person, it's the death of many things and many people at the same time. So I believe that this Holy Mary was correct, and not as I thought before this experience, my whole life, that it was not correct.
You know, I didn't have a chance, of course, so far to read the book because it's in Spanish. The only thing I could do the reviews in the Spanish media, which really are very strong and powerful, and some of your interviews. And El País really says that, this chronicle is born out of grief, guilt, and the desire to give meaning to what it seems, to the war, to the loss, to the survival. I'm not searching for the meaning of the death. You know, there is no meaning of the death of the people who shouldn't be dead. But what you're telling the audience in Colombia, the audience who read you in Spanish so far, I think that would be the audience in English and other languages. It's a global audience. There are Ukrainians who really, I think it's very important for us to read that book. But what is really also something you want to tell? You know, this book is about the people who were there with you, about Sergio, Catalina. There is a part about Victoria, so maybe you'll tell also about the book itself.
Well, it is about my falling in love with a country that is very far away from Colombia, a country that I didn't know really, that I confused with other countries. I didn't have a very clear idea of what Ukraine was. And but I began to read and trying to understand Ukraine because of literature, because of this act of resistance of these young ladies that were publishing books in Ukraine, that I know that is also an act of resistance, of cultural resistance, because for years and centuries, Ukrainian was all forbidden or treated as a small Russian dialect or something. So for me, it was so beautiful, this act of resistance. And I was trying also to convey to Colombian and Spanish readers and Latin American readers that what is happening in Ukraine, the aggression and the invasion that the Russian made against Ukraine, is important for the whole world. It's important for democracy, for freedom, for Europe. That the fact that you choose, that you preferred since the 90s, but especially since 14, since Maidan, is that you prefer to be a country like an European country that is part of your culture and not part of the Russian Federation. And when sometimes people oppose to that, as in Hungary, for example, I always propose, why don't you make an election, a plebiscite or a referendum asking the Hungarians, okay, you can choose, let's go and go again to under the arms of Mother Russia and the Russian Federation. That's okay, you can do that. You still have more or less free elections, so do that. Let's go away from Europe and adhere again to the Russian Federation, that nice neighbor. And for me, it was so normal as a distant person of the far west, Colombia is the far west of the West. It's like, I don't know, like for the East is the Tibet. We are the Tibet of South America. And for us, I think it's also very simple. Do you want to have some freedoms and normal things that European Union has? Or do you prefer to live under a regime of special democracy, as they call that? And that special democracy, when you oppose to the leader, you can be touched in your face and be poisoned. And when there are no freedom to even say the word war or things like that. But also for me, it was very important to give voice to Victoria, because I read a speech she made in Norway, and she began her speech. I'm receiving a prize for Volodymyr Vakulenko. I'm here speaking for a colleague that cannot speak, and because he was abducted, tortured, and murdered by the Russian army. And she felt the responsibility of having his voice in her voice. In the book, many times when I was writing the book, in this same house, I was in some ways hearing or trying to hear or asking Victoria to dictate me some of her words to put in my book. So I was not sure I was alive. Sometimes I was alive, but I felt I am a rational person. I don't believe in these things. I am an atheist, but in some ways I felt that Victoria was around here, giving me some advice of my writing and telling me some words that she couldn't tell. And as she wrote a lot in English, and as there are some books published by her also in Spanish, I could hear her voice on books, on speeches, and sometimes in my head, inside my head.
How do you remember her? Because I think it's also our kind of like part to let people stay with the others, just to, so far we remember, we can tell the story also how they were like the people. You still spent some days with her.
Yes. Well, we were not friends. I met her in Arsenal Book Fair. I was very happy because of the presentation of my book in Ukrainian. So I took some more than 2 or 3 glasses of white wine. And during our trip to the east, to the Donetsk, Victoria confessed that she also was a little bit drunk when we spoke in Arsenal Book Fair, because she was happy, because she received a message from a friend of her that she was very worried he could be killed or something, because he used to send messages to her very frequently, and for some days he disappeared. So just before our meeting presenting the campaign Aguanta Ucrania, that is a campaign of Latin Americans for Ukraine, she confesses that she also drank some glasses of white wine because she was happy after receiving a message of this person that was in the front. But when writers met, we know that for us it's very important to know the work of the other writer, because we are more in our written words than in any other. And I hadn't read anything by Victoria, and Victoria hadn't read anything by me. So we were a little bit shy. I didn't call her Vika as her friends call her. I told her Victoria. But after her death, after our death, because in some ways I also died there, we became friends. Reading her, we became friends. If she were here, I would call, "Hey, Vika, hi, happy to see you again." And now I understand many things that I didn't know. Like, she was a person, is quite normal during the war, since the first war, since Homer, that women stay at home or go away from the war, and men go to the war. And in Victoria's case, she went back to Ukraine. She left literature. She put her son away in Poland in safe, but she stayed. She stayed and began documenting war crimes, as you perfectly know. I read also the posthumous book she published in English, looking at women, looking at war. So she was not Penelope waiting for the husband in a safe place. She was Penelope that went to the war, and she knew perfectly that even if not everybody will understand her, she had this responsibility. She left literature away. She left fiction away. She only sometimes used poetry because she felt that poetry was like the word, that words are like shells that explodes in words, and only poetry and testimony of war crimes. And also this situation that I think her husband was away and she was in, and she was the woman. It was very impressive for me.
Tell me, what was Aguanta Ucrania doing and what is still doing, so, and how it's, again, you started to speak that you want to tell the world, but what I understand also from your interview, it's not like easy to persuade some of the people in Latin America. Some people do understand, and how you also explain, without going to geopolitics, we understand why in Latin America, some people have maybe leftist view, have very anti-American views, have, some pro-Soviet nostalgia. All this is there. But on human level, I still kind of struggle to understand that sometimes we meet like brilliant people, sometimes we meet people like you, who understand the thing. It's very easy to communicate. You understand the suffering. Like you joined the campaign, before you came to Ukraine. It's not like just you started to be compassionate and you have this empathy after. But how it's for you, to deal with your colleagues, with other writers in your region? How you, again, like even after writing your books, I know like some people react differently. I know that like probably people will react differently on this particular book, but if you speak about the war against Ukraine and all this experience, it's not like a unanimous support and understanding.
Yes, this campaign that was invented by Sergio Jaramillo, who was with me and with Catalina Gómez in this short trip to the Donetsk region, it began in January or February, the first anniversary of the invasion. And Victoria was in Cartagena with Alexandra Matvichuk also, but I was not in Cartagena. And then Sergio asked me to convince some of my colleagues, writers, especially writers or actors, musicians, to convince to come with us to Aguanta Ucrania. And it was very disappointing that many friends, especially in Mexico and Argentina, but also in Colombia, they totally disagree. They said that maybe that Russia and Ukraine was the same country, that Putin was a very angry man and he was provoked by NATO, or that maybe the person who was the real culprit, how do you say that? The real was Zelensky, or the language, or things like that. And these friends of mine were usually or totally people from the left. They still believe that in some ways the Russian Federation is the heir of the left, of the Soviet Union that was with Cuba, or that was part of the left in last century. That's so ridiculous. What I think now is that they were saying exactly the same that Donald Trump said to Zelensky and to the press when he became president. So they are anti-American. So when someone happened that America was with Biden, with Ukraine, they thought, okay, if Biden and United States is with Ukraine, they are in the wrong side of history and of reality. But now that Trump, this extreme right president, and his aides around him were saying that, humiliating Zelensky in public, putting all the time the finger against him. Okay, maybe, I hope they felt how wrong they were in what they thought. And it's not a question of if you are from the left, from the right, but you have to be with the victims of the aggression, of the invasion, with the victims of a language, with the victims of free elections and decisions of the people, from people who gave, now this is very actual, who gave all the nuclear weapons in exchange of security, of land, of invasions, of territory. And well, now that they are bombing nuclear places in Iran, and it's so dangerous bombing nuclear places, as you perfectly know, for not for places where you are enriching uranium for weapons, but for electricity, for power. That's a really dangerous decision, because you can open really, well, this radio. You from Chernobyl was one of the biggest causes of the collapse of the Soviet Union. It was clear for Ukrainians that Soviet Union was not that clear, powerful, and good science as propaganda told. But now, I don't know, today, the world is really dangerous. And many people in the world will think, they are thinking, many countries, that the only way to being safe from big powers that thinks that only power, that force is the only way of dealing with the reality, that the most powerful countries and men have always the reason, they are always right. So many people will think, okay, let's, like North Korea, these nice people of the North Korea decided, okay, let's construct a nuclear weapons, so we will be respected, because the only thing that they respect is power. And that's very dangerous for the world. That's really, for geopolitical, is so terrible.
And of course, we are thinking, I think, both these days about our dear friend Catalina Gómez, like our friend, this journalist who was with you back then in Kramatorsk, who actually lives between Kiev and Tehran. And what she writes to us, that she finds this as well, this kind of strange things that, like, Tehran, the bombs are falling over Tehran.
Yes, I understood how brave are women in these wars, how brave are war journalists like Catalina, or human rights activists like Victoria or you. I'm worried because of you also. I'm sorry to say that on air, but please take care. Please take care of you. I don't know. I was invited 2 days ago to go back to Kyiv. I know I have to write because of my family, because of the twins my daughter has now. I don't have the guts. I cannot go there until you win the war, and I hope you will win the war, or until you achieve something like what happened with North and South Korea, that they are still in war. We don't accept these borders. We don't accept this peace as something that is justice, but we can deal with peace without firing each other. But it's difficult when the world thinks that only the big powers, big men, angry, dangerous, and people that lies without becoming red, they think that they can decide everything for smaller countries. Anyway, Ukraine is a lesson for all of us. The resistance of Ukraine is incredible. I said before that I love this country, that I felt in love with this country, with the women that stay still there, with actors like the actor I saw in the English theater of Kyiv, who was acting with 2 other soldiers, gay soldiers in the front. You cannot put this kind of place in Russia. No, there are no soldiers that are gay. Everything is forbidden. But one of the actors that went to the army, because that's the worst, like in the first battle he died. So it's so difficult to know all of these things.
Héctor, your books are not all sad. I read some of them, but of course, the one which is translated in Ukraine, and I really want to advise everybody to read it in its Oblivion, a memoir. It's also the book about your father, who was a very special figure. Yes, he was a doctor, he was university professor, human rights leader, and a person who has founded the Colombian, School for Public Health, yes, and developed the health programs in Medellin, from where are you? And he was assassinated, yes, when you were 27. And what was fascinating in this book, I know that it's not like the moment to tell the whole thing, that it's really the story of his life, but which also tells the story of Colombia, how kind of brave he was in taking care about the poor, but also being attacked both from the right very much, including from the members of your family, and also from some left. So probably that also matters how you see this. And for me, this is a question, maybe you'll tell a bit more about your father and the book, which I really advise to read. How do you find this way to cut through the ideologies? You know, you're coming from the continent where people who are on the different aisles, they are like so extreme that, and again, like we also like in the fight where there is a clear evil and good, like I wouldn't defend Russia. There are some things which are, bad was with juntas in Latin America. But generally what was fascinating that you're trying to explain how actually is it to be, not to be that adherent, fanatical in their ideology. And what is this choice? Because sometimes maybe it's easier to join one of the tribes rather than to cut through them. What are your thoughts about that? What are your lessons from your life of your father?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a very old story in history. During Dante's time, when we went to exile, there was the war in Italy between, in Italian is Guelfi e Ghibellini, Guelfos y Ghibellinos, I don't know in English, could be Guelfs and Ghibellinos. And that was a phrase that is called those people who the Guelfi told they are Ghibellini. And when the Ghibellini said those people are the Guelfi, that are the people who have the reason. And my father was in some ways like that. But he was a human rights fighter, and he was a hero in some ways because he was fighting against violence very powerfully. And he knew, as Victoria also knew, that his life was in danger. For me, going to Ukraine was totally different. I'm not an activist, but I'm not a fanatical at all. I am with victims and with justice, but I don't went there as a hero. But it was very strange that I had exactly the same age my father had when he was killed, when I was in Kramatorsk. And that is also part of the obsession that came to my mind, the obsession also of my children that told me, okay, do you know, father, that if they killed you there, we became as mad as you and our family became after our grandfather assassination. And I know that for the Victoria's family, or for the father of the twins that died there in the Kramatorsk pizza, Ria, it's very difficult to understand these heroes. I admire and I love my father and I admire heroes, but it's so difficult to live in a country where you need heroes and where you need heroes like Victoria, or sorry to say that, like you. But it's beautiful. Ukraine needs that kind of people. And you are fighting not for you only, but for the future, the children, the possibility of having a free and democratic country. I am with you, I'm totally with you, but even if I don't have the force, I'm kind of a coward of going back to Ukraine until you win the war. I want to say that I admire you, and I'm with you. And the only thing I can do, and I will continue to do, is my responsibility, and it's my duty as a writer. I will continue to write, and I will continue to defend the reasons you have, that are the reasons of everything that we defend: beauty, happiness, future, children, health, liberty, free democracy, elections, free speech, free thought. Those things that were in many ways invented in Europe. And for me, European Union represents our really maybe unique hope in the whole world. And I hope that European Union will stay with you all the time and will defend not only the right, but the need that Ukraine becomes the next country of the European Union, the next country that will be inside its union, and that will defend the values and the principles that we are talking about.
Thank you, Héctor. And I think that, there is not such a world covered. People are where you are. You're coming from a different place. You did what you did. You wrote your book. It's not everybody should be here. A lot of other people are not there. I think it's this kind of circle. We all feel we should be somewhere else, or we couldn't. Yet, there is one question. I didn't want to make this talk, difficult, but wherever the theme, the topic, and the moment where we are speaking, it is difficult. And I think I wanted even to omit this question, but I will dare. I knew that, after you returned back then to Colombia, it still took some time to kind of tell the message, the condemnation we're not expected from the government to extent, which was there, at least that's what I understood from talking to Catalina and from Sergio. And did you have this feeling of of course people feel sorry if people express your, those whom they probably shocked, they are, I even don't want to, it's horrible to imagine what your family was thinking, it's all very hard. Children, your wife. But I'm speaking about generally society. Did you really have this feeling that you really need to deserve to be called a victim, that it's still we are kind of fighting in this war, this right to be called the legitimate victim? I just remember this moment. I wrote the article for the column, after the events in Kramatorsk for The Guardian. And now they don't even have the comments, but at that time they had. And, there was this kind of people saying, yes, but the US, actually it also sounds very strange speaking about this today, but they were writing about the American, attack in Iraq, and I thought what it has to do with Victoria, what it has to do with the rest. And the questions were kind of as if they are challenging whether it's not a propaganda. And I'm used to that, I'm used to that when people somewhere in Russia, wherever in social media write, it's propaganda, it's not true or something like that. But in this particular case, when you know the person, when it's a person close to you, you're really, it's really painful, So I wonder, did you also have this, that some people kind of denied to fully understand what happened to those Colombians in Kramatorsk or even in Colombia?
Yes, it's so difficult and it's so sad. Colleagues of mine said things like, okay, in the second floor of this pizzeria in Kramatorsk was the central office of the NATO. Or there is Héctor Abad. I was with not my blood, but probably Victoria's or some other people's blood on my shirt. There is Héctor Abad, plenty of shit in his body. Or a colleague of ours, a quite famous colleague, said, Aguanta Ucrania is a criminal movement because they are saying to Ukrainians, go to death. Let you, Ukrainians, be killed by the powerful Russia. The same president said, I couldn't choose between Putin or Biden. Or he said also, Ukraine is so far away. Don't tell me about Ukraine. What Ukraine? I don't care about Ukraine. So with the media, with this X and with this, I left everything. I left X or Twitter or things because it was so dirty, ugly. And they were lying all the time and telling you that terrible lies and insults and things. The world nowadays is there's plenty of not only fake news, but plenty of insults everywhere. So when you try to say some words different, words of pity, of love, of compassion, of empathy, even Elon Musk said empathy is the most
weakness. Yes, it's a weakness. It's a weakness of the Western civilization.
Yes, the worst mistake of the West world. And I know Victoria wrote a book about compassion and about empathy, excess of empathy. I couldn't read that, but I know it's the syndrome of the fall or something in Ukrainian, or fall syndrome or autumn syndrome. So sad.
But what gives you, the strength to, it's